All right, everybody. It's time for our weekly live at 5 Q&A. So that's 5 p.m. Eastern for those of you who are not in the Eastern time zone. But I'm Jodi Carlton, and this is my second weekly live stream here on YouTube. I've been doing these live streams, these Q&A, I call them Ask Me Anything lives, in my private Facebook group now for a long time. But I decided to start doing it here with you guys on YouTube because there's a lot of you here too. So, anyway, I'm really excited to be here. I'm Jodi Carlton, and I am an autism, some of you still call it Asperger's, expert and relationship coach. And so I've been working with folks on the autism spectrum for over 10 years now. I have a background as a licensed therapist, but I actually kind of figured out that the therapy training and modalities that I've been trained to use didn't work very well with autism spectrum adults who are in relationships. And so I've changed up that quite a bit in the coaching work that I do. And so my entire career now is devoted to helping you guys who are in relationships, and one of you is on the autism spectrum. Now, if you're curious, I just said that I'm an autism spectrum relationship coach, and some of you still call it Asperger's. There's a lot of opinions about that, and if you're curious about what that's all about and why there are two different labels, I also have a TikTok channel that I just recently started. It's called Asperger's Relationships, and I'm explaining what the labels are all about and why we have different labels. And I use the handle Asperger's Relationships, by the way, because most of you that come to me for help prefer the term Asperger's. And there's some of you prefer autism, but I actually did a poll here on the YouTube channel last week, and the last time I checked, I was asking which term you guys prefer, and the last time I checked, Asperger's was well out ahead, and so anyway, I try to use the language that you guys most resonates with most of you. So this is a live Q&A, and I'll be here as long as you're here. And so I already have some questions that have been submitted. Both you guys can submit questions ahead of time. You can actually get to this live stream by going to my channel, and you can submit a question right here ahead of time. But if you want to submit a question anonymously, you can send it to our email address at support@spectrumrelationships.com, and we'll be sure and answer your question, or I will, here on the live. Hey Taylor, good to see you. Yeah, TikTok's fun. I'm having fun with TikTok. It's fun. My kids are kind of horrified, honestly. They're like, "Mom, you're gonna get canceled." But I'm trying not to get canceled. You guys don't cancel me on TikTok. So, all right. Let's go ahead. Oh, before I start with the actual Q&A, and I'm waiting on folks to jump on here, I wanted to let you know that in 2 weeks, the live at 5 in 2 weeks on the 27th, I am going to actually not do a Q&A that day, but I'm going to go through the Autism Quotient quiz with you guys, one question at a time. There are 50 questions. And the reason why I'm going to do this, this is a quiz that's available to you guys online, and it's a pretty good screening tool for adults on the spectrum. But I hear a lot of feedback that sometimes folks are confused about how to answer the questions, and they're not sure what the question's getting at. And I'm not going to be telling you how to answer these questions, but I'm going to go through it with you, and I'll have you open the quiz on your own screen. So I recommend that you have two devices, or unless you're at a PC or a laptop where you can open up two windows at the same time. And we're going to go through this quiz together, and you will get a report at the end. And you can do this as yourself, or you can even answer these questions as if you have, if you think maybe your partner's on the spectrum. And then at the end, I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to meet with myself or my other spectrum relationships coach that does some coaching for me, Debbie King, to go over your results with you. And so this will be like a a consultation to go over your results with you. So that's coming up in 2 weeks. All right. Now, let's see. If anybody has any questions, be sure and drop them here. In the meantime, Miss Taylor, I believe that we have a question from you. And I'm going to actually, this is a longer question, so I'm going to read this to you guys. And then after the live, I'm going to see if we can get captions put in here. I'm still learning how to do this on YouTube. But Taylor says, okay, my partner says when I get dressed up and with makeup and we go out for dinner and drinks with him and our friends, that he barely recognizes me and I'm like a stranger to him. Partially, the makeup throws him off. And he also says I get performative. That's in quotes, and I think that's an interesting term. I've always been this way, and I enjoy getting dolled up, but we don't do it a lot together. Normally, I'll go with friends. A couple drinks with the social energy makes me feel more expressive and theatrical and fun. I'm like this anyways. It's just enhanced. He says he feels we are less interested in each other during these times, but I'm just kind of distracted, and honestly, he can be too in his personality for me at these times. So I get in my own world a little. And then Taylor goes on to say, I get my feelings hurt because I felt like I'm doing something wrong. And he doesn't really change when he drinks, and he's really predictable. So could it be that he has a narrower range of expression and me having a wider range of facets is foreign to him? Thank you in advance. I'm ruminating about this. Okay, Taylor, you always have some really, really good questions. And so there's a few nuggets in here that I want to address. And if any of you are here and you also have some feedback for Taylor, if you're on the spectrum, or if you just have some comments, please drop those in the comments section here. So basically, one of the things that he's communicating to you is that you look different to him. And he says he barely recognizes you when you put makeup on. So this has to do with that need for sameness, that need for structure and routine. I can remember, for example, when my children were younger, if I changed my hair color, or like my hair's gotten kind of longer now, if I were to cut it off a lot shorter, it would really, really upset my daughter who has autism, who's on the autism spectrum. She has Asperger's. It would upset her because she had this this look. My brain's not working, you guys. She had this look, this image of me, that was mom in her mind. And you have to remember that folks on the spectrum think more in images, and they're very visual. And whereas those of us who are neurotypical, we might be visual too, but we think more in language, like words. And so the visual is really, really important to folks on the spectrum. It's how things are categorized and organized and structured in their world, the visual patterns and images. So, Taylor, if you normally, like I know for me, when I'm not working and on live streams with you guys, I may have my hair in a ponytail and a hat on, or I may be, wearing a t-shirt and yoga pants. But when I go live, I put the makeup on, I fix the hair. And so if my normal look is one way and then I look a good bit differently with the lipstick and the makeup, that can be distressing for someone on the spectrum, because the person that is visually represented and brought up into their mind when they think of you is not what they're looking at now. And so it feels like you're a different person, and that connection is harder. So the thing is, though, Taylor, you're saying, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. And you're not doing anything wrong. This is part of your personality. And you talked about the energy that you feel when you're with these other people. I'm hearing extrovert there from you. And so you get really energized from being with other people. He may enjoy it, but doesn't quite, his personality doesn't change very much, and it's just kind of not as big of a thing for him as it is for you. So one of the ways that I describe this is the difference between like a 4K television, really high definition, and a standard def, or maybe even black and white. And black and white's probably a good analogy, because a lot of folks on the spectrum really think more in black and white absolutes. And so when you have, black and white is, I'm in this situation, there's just a very linear type personality and look. This is how I dress. This is how I don't dress. This is how Taylor looks. This is how Taylor doesn't look. And so then when you change that up some and you've got this really vibrant, high definition thing going on when you get your makeup on, it's not something that's relatable to him. And so when he gets dressed up, you say he kind of looks the same. His personality doesn't really change much. Here's the thing: neither one of you are right. Nobody's right. Nobody's wrong. You're just really different. And no, Taylor, you're not doing anything wrong. And you're asking me, could it be that he has a narrower range of expression and me having a wider range? Yes, that's part of that 4K, that color. And so you are maybe even more expressive. Look at me, I'm talking with my hands. And so I'm very expressive too. That's more your personality, and his maybe less. Now, those of you who are watching, that doesn't mean that everybody on the spectrum is really narrow, like has a narrow range of emotion. This is something that comes up a lot, and people get so upset with my videos sometimes. There's a couple of videos where I talk about how some folks on the spectrum have a narrower range of emotion, and the key word there is some folks, not everybody, some, and particularly men. And I'm saying this because I've met like over 1,000 people easily now who are on the autism spectrum, and they tell me, this is what I hear from the people that I work with, that range of emotion feels so, it's not, well, feels is probably not the right word to use there, but that they can tell their partners and other people are really experiencing these significant emotional extremes. A lot of guys on the spectrum have shared with me that they really feel like their partners may be bipolar. They're concerned their partners may be bipolar because they see these extreme mood swings, when in reality, it's just really foreign. And you mentioned the word foreign, Taylor. It's a foreign thing, that extreme emotion from from being really, like, I can be really excited about something one minute and then really bummed out the next minute. That doesn't mean I'm bipolar, though. I'm not. But I have had two partners on the spectrum who actually questioned if I was bipolar. I'm definitely not bipolar. But those extremes, that swing in emotions for someone who is on the spectrum who doesn't have that range of emotion, that can seem excessive. Now, something else about the autism spectrum that I want you guys to realize is it is about extremes. So folks on the spectrum are, for example, either hypersensitive to certain sensations, which means they're super sensitive. They tend to really notice sound and light and textures and tastes and flavors. So they can be super sensitive, or they can be hyposensitive, which means undersensitive, which means it takes a lot of a sensation for them to notice it. The thing is there's all these endless combinations of how, if one person can be really sensitive to taste, texture, and the next person not sensitive, undersensitive. One person can be really sensitive to light, the next person not sensitive. You put all those combinations together, and you've got a lot of different people looking a lot of different ways, but the common thread is the extremes, the hyper or hyposensitivity. That's what we look for in assessing and screening and diagnosing in the psychological community. That's what we look for. And I am trained to diagnose, you guys. In my coaching work, I do screenings. I keep it to screenings, and I can let you know whether or not the traits that you have are consistent with autism spectrum traits. But this applies to emotions too. This hyper and hypo, or highly emotional, wide range of emotion, or a narrower range of emotion. So someone on the spectrum may be very, very, very have a lot of emotional energy there. I've actually worked with one guy, this 20, I think he's 21 or 22 guy in the UK, and he was on the spectrum. He was so emotionally sensitive, if you will, to the emotions of others that he actually ended up experiencing the same medical and health conditions as them because he was really sensitive to their energy. His body, men can experience this when their wives are pregnant, by the way. We see this when women have morning sickness. Men sometimes experience the same sickness because they're picking up on that energy. So those men who do that are super sensitive, and not sensitive as in uh, easily, insulted or offended. I don't mean sensitive like that. I mean sensitive in terms of experiencing emotion. And so a lot of folks on the spectrum can really feel a huge range of emotion, but it's usually either that big range or the really narrow range. And more often than not, the guys that I work with have that narrower range. Women can be both. I've actually worked with women who it went both ways, where women who are super had very very sensitive to emotions and can actually be empaths in that they can really really detect the energy of others. And then I've also worked with women who had that narrower range of emotion. Taylor says, love the input as always. So does this mean next time we're out together, we just know we might not be as connected, and that is okay? Yeah, that's a great question. So it's always about recognizing who you are and not, we can make some accommodations for each other, of course, but it's so important that we all, no matter who we're with, no matter what kind of relationship it is, whether it's a romantic partnership, a marriage, a friendship, parent relationship, we embrace who we are and we embrace who the other person is as a totally separate individual, unique from us. And so, yeah, so in that situation, Taylor, neither one of you is right or wrong, but it's important for you to just be aware, to be aware of it, so that when you do go out, you can say to him, you can remind him, okay, you know what? We're going to go out Saturday night with our friends, John and Gigi, whatever. Um, I'm going to put my makeup on because I like that. I like doing that. It feels good to me. You're going to wear whatever you want to wear, and that's fine. And I am going to really probably be a lot livelier than you're used to. And you're going to be you at whatever that is for you. And that's not going to feel quite like the us that we are every day. But this is still us. This is a different version of us. This is us with our friends. It's still us. It's just not us every day. And it's okay. So acknowledge it. Maybe talk about it. Don't give it too much. Don't put too much into it because then that's overwhelming. But acknowledge it and be ready for it so that you're not surprised by it when it happens, because you don't want Saturday night to come around and you're like, oh, I forgot about this. So yeah, that was a great question. I see that there are a few of you here, so if anybody else wants to drop any questions in the comments, let's hear it. I do have another question from the Facebook group though, or email, I'm not sure where it came from. So this is from Ashley, and she says, my husband, who has been diagnosed with Asperger's, has a severe empathy disorder. I am neurotypical and am naturally completely on the opposite side of the spectrum and am a very emotional person. I come from a family that is very good at empathy and emotional understanding. How can I cope with a husband who appears to be unable to feel and understand my emotions? My daughters are also struggling. He doesn't recognize when they are crying. He has to be told to comfort them, Am I harming them by keeping them in this situation? All right, like Taylor's question, there are several pieces of this, and I wanted to unpackage this question. Ashley, I think I'm realizing this was a comment that you posted on last week's live, so I hope you're here today or that you're going to watch. Um, so you said he has a severe empathy disorder. Um, what that sounds like to me is that he is, from what you're saying, he really struggles to recognize the emotional experience that other people are having. You said that that your daughters may be crying and he doesn't recognize they're crying. So I would be curious if he doesn't even see that they're crying, or if he sees it and he doesn't know what to do. And if he can't see that they're actually crying, that's more unlikely. Like if there's tears and they're crying, he may not be able to see that they're upset. He may not know how to interpret the tears. And here's the you said use the word crying, which here's the thing, tears can mean a lot of different things. I go over this in my communication transformation program, um, because this is where language can get really difficult between folks on the spectrum and folks who are neurotypical. Crying can really mean a lot of different things, and it's hard for a lot of folks on the spectrum to interpret which thing it means. So when we stop and think about it, crying can be I'm hurt, I'm in pain, I've injured myself. It can also be I'm sad, I'm very sad about something, and sadness is different than I'm upset. So sadness is my friend hurt me in some way, said something that hurt my feelings, or um, my dog passed away, my dog died, I'm sad. Or there can be tears that are angry tears. A lot of women, especially some men, but a lot of women cry and a lot of women get really frustrated with themselves because the tears start to flow when they're angry. So tears can mean anger. Um, what am I missing, you guys? Tears can also be joy. So see how confusing this can be. Tears can also be joy, tears of joy. So if someone is on the spectrum and they see tears and maybe they don't know the context, or maybe they do know the context, it may be difficult for that autistic person to read what the tears mean. And the other thing is, folks on the spectrum oftentimes don't know how to read facial expressions. And the research tells us it's because, well, we don't really know why, but we know that folks on the spectrum tend not to look at faces for information. There's been some studies on babies that are toddlers or young ones that we know are on the spectrum, and we've seen that neurotypical young toddlers and babies, as they're growing up, they look at faces, eyes and faces, to get information because there's no language yet, and they look at the facial expressions of parents and caregivers to learn to understand this communication, angry and surprised and happy and loving. And so as autistic children are developing in those early years, they don't tend to look at faces. So they don't tend to associate what the face looks like with an emotion. And this is something that's learned by neurotypical individuals, so that they can see the tears and match it up with the facial expression that means either sad, angry, sad, angry, happy, and then realize, okay, this is what's happening here, and this usually happens in a split second for neurotypical folks. But for someone with autism, that matching, that pairing isn't there, so they don't know how to respond to the tears. Let me see what Nathan's saying. So Nathan's saying yes, and hi, by the way, glad you're here. You can have tears of joy, But if you don't understand the context, you might miss the message exactly. And you said, like you said, an Aspie may treat someone as if they're upset or sad or angry when all they know is it's one of those emotions, and to adjust to each method with a different understanding. Right. So if someone on the spectrum has also kind of has a definition of tears to mean angry or upset or angry, maybe some people aren't criers. And so maybe uh, if someone on the spectrum has only been around crying when someone was angry, that may be the script that is there. That, okay, when I see tears, there's anger. So if they see tears from someone else that are sad tears, the autistic individual may respond as if this person's angry. And that could be very confusing because that's not what's actually happening. And Nathan's saying it can come off as if they're not listening or understanding. And yeah, because it absolutely can feel like they're not understanding. So, Ashley, back to your question. You're saying, how can I cope with a husband who appears to be unable to feel and understand my emotions? So, the first part of that question is that he doesn't feel the same emotions. Goes back to Taylor's question. It's important to realize that you're two separate human beings and individuals. And one of the keys one of the keys to knowing or discerning whether or not a relationship is going to work is if your husband is willing to acknowledge that he misses it sometimes. And if he's willing to say, yeah, I don't get it. I miss it. I don't get it. I know you're telling me that you're having these emotions, but I don't get it. I wish I could, but I don't understand it. I can't relate. But he's willing to acknowledge that it's happening. That's a critical piece of this puzzle. And some folks on the spectrum take a little while to coming around to being able to acknowledge that. So it's not an immediate showstopper or deal breaker. That's the goal, though, eventually to recognize that you each don't have the same. Those of us who are neurotypical can't understand the autistic experience either. We don't have a frame. We can't relate to that. So we can't be more like them, and they can't be more like us. But what's critical in a relationship is that both of you are able to come to a place where you get that. And we're different. We're different. And there's a reason why we're different. But we're different, and you're okay. You're who you are, and I'm who I am. So he's not going to be able to actually feel your emotions. And so it's important, Ashley, to come to a place where you don't expect him to actually feel your emotions. But it is reasonable for you to expect him to listen, to hear you out, and to honor and respect when you say, I am feeling this, whatever emotion it is, and check it out. Do you understand what that means? And if he doesn't, explain it to him. And then if he still doesn't, then to recognize that he can't get it. And this is where we all have to know kind of what our deal breakers are. And I really can't answer the question for you about whether or not you're harming your daughters in this relationship because I don't really have enough information. If he is willing to acknowledge that he doesn't get it, and you're able to communicate to him, hey, this is really going on. Also, if he's directable, if you can if you tell him, hey, the girls are crying, they need a hug, or they need you to ask them what's wrong, and he's like, oh, okay, all right, then that's a lot more desirable than if his response is, what the heck do they, why should I have to comfort them? Or they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. And there's not even a willingness to be to receive, I guess, a willingness to receive what you can recognize that he's not. Those are the types of things that you want to look for to see if your relationship it can work. That willingness to recognize and acknowledge the differences And for him to even being willing to say, I really can't tell when they're crying. Please help me out when they need some comforting, if he can receive that. Again, if he's not quite there, if he doesn't know he's on the spectrum, I can't remember. You said he's diagnosed, so he knows he's on the spectrum. So I don't know how long ago it's been that he was diagnosed, but it can take some time for folks who've been diagnosed, especially adults, to really kind of embrace that framework. At first, it can really feel like when they're diagnosed with Asperger's, a lot of folks tell me they feel like something's, there's something's wrong with them. And I really encourage you not to ever use that terminology. But it's a framework for understanding that the brains are working differently and processing the world and processing emotions, processing relationships differently. So maybe give him some time to absorb it and understand it, and definitely steer clear of language and terminology like this is all about, you're doing this, you are the problem in our relationship. Now, that's not to diminish your experience and what it's been like to be in a relationship with someone who didn't relate to your emotions. If you didn't know that this diagnosis was there, most people have really experienced a lot of pain and emotional hurt on both sides. And it is important, and it's very important for you to acknowledge, both of you, yeah, it's been hard. Asperger's relationships are hard, especially if you don't know going in that somebody's on the spectrum, or you don't know about what that means. Maybe you know they're on the spectrum, but you don't know what that means. All right, let's see what you guys are saying. So Taylor says, yes, sometimes I feel too. There's a challenge with my partner relating to me, and especially saying sorry seems to not be in his Rolodex, which I don't understand since I'm pretty comfortable saying sorry. Okay, yeah, that's actually a really good point. So I'm not a real big fan of I'm sorry, Taylor. So you can shoot me now. I'm not a big fan of it because most of the time apologies need to be made when there is a kind of an intentional hurt. Sometimes apologies are appropriate when there's an unintentional hurt, just to say, wow, I'm sorry that this hurt you. But here's the thing. An apology is really kind of an ownership of a mistake, an ownership of hurt. And there is a subtle implication there of intentionality. So when we apologize, we're apologizing for something we've done to another person. We might not, there isn't always an intentionality, but there's a recognition that what we did ended up hurting the other person. The reason I keep bringing up the intentionality is this is a really big deal to folks on the spectrum, the intentionality. So neurotypicals are more like, as a matter of fact, neurotypicals are sometimes compulsive apologizers. And I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Or sorry, oh, I'm sorry. Did I call too late? I'm sorry. Compulsive I'm sorryers. This is really confusing to folks on the spectrum. So like, why are you saying you're sorry? Did you do something on purpose? Most folks on the spectrum associate that apology with intentionality. And if there was no intent to harm, then it makes no sense to apologize. It doesn't mean that they don't feel, or that they don't wish that you weren't hurt or that you weren't, whatever. But an apology means I did it to you on purpose. And so I'm not a big fan of apologies unless there is intentionality and there's regret and remorse. That's what makes the most sense. Acknowledgement is different than an apology. Acknowledging, okay, I did that, it hurt you, noted. It's important to note what happened so that I can change my behavior in the future, but not necessarily doesn't necessarily need an apology. Hi, Red Hills Rancher. I know who you are. Good to see you here. Um, Taylor, you said, I've heard you talk about the difficulty of some Aspies and saying sorry. I wonder if this is common. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. And it's because of that intentionality piece. Those of us who are neurotypical tend to think that our partners don't want to take responsibility for their actions. And because that's how neurotypicals go about it. That when you've done something that somebody else got hurt, we apologize, especially if we're codependent. If we're a little bit codependent, we're the codependents tend to be, compulsive apologizers. And so when somebody doesn't apologize back when something's been done to hurt us, it's we that to us translates, I'm not cared about. This person doesn't care about me. But that's not, this is how we speak different languages, you guys. Folks on the spectrum, that apology is about, I'm remorseful and regretful that I did this intentional thing to you. So it's about the difference in the definition of what an apology is. If there's any of you here who want to comment on that, please do. Nathan says, I say I'm sorry too much. I don't know if that's because I'm insecure or if it's part of my Canadian heritage, which saying I'm sorry is very common there. Yeah, that can actually be just a part of the lingo, where your cultural lingo. And you guys know that in my communication program, I talk about 4 stages of communication. And that first stage is about what we bring to our interactions, what we bring to the relationship. And that cultural influence is one of those things that we bring a lot to our relationship. But cultural jargon and lingo, can definitely be part of that. Nathan says, definitely annoying, a compulsive, I'm sorry. I get the surprise from NTs, lol. Taylor saying, how to soothe hurt feelings when they don't apologize, though. Okay. This is when you need to, it's important for you to look inward and ask yourself, what am I actually hurt about? Where is this hurt coming from? And you want to ask yourself 5 levels of why. One of my folks in the Facebook group brought up this 5 levels of why. Why am I hurt by this? And why is that? And why is that? And why is that? And why is that? 5 times, because it's really important to get to the root of your own hurt, to understand what that's all about before we can expect our partner to fix that hurt for us. Because sometimes the hurt has to do with something having to do with us and not them. Now, sometimes it does have to do with our partner being just disrespectful or inconsiderate or unkind. And then it's more a matter of willingness to acknowledge what happened and a willingness to change the behavior going forward. That is how you deal with it, Taylor. You want to look at, is there a willingness to adjust going forward? And it may not happen overnight. We didn't become who we are overnight. None of us became who we are overnight. So we can't change who we are, our reflexive responses, our actions, our behaviors overnight. But if there's a willingness for him to say, okay, I hear what you're saying, and that reflective listening is stage 2. This is what I'm hearing you say, and I'm going to file that away for next time. Then is there really anything to be hurt about? Because we're going to step on each other's toes. We're going to do things that hurt each other. It's impossible to be in a relationship where we don't hurt each other in some ways. Nathan, you're saying I agree. When I hear I'm sorry, it so eases the hurt. So I feel guilty when I hurt someone, but don't apologize because I didn't realize I hurt someone and it looked intentional. Okay, let me read that again. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. When I hear I'm sorry, it so eases the hurt. So I feel guilty when I hurt someone, but don't apologize because I didn't realize I hurt someone and it looked intentional. That's what I was talking about. So it's that intentionality. You're saying it feels good when somebody does hurt me and they acknowledge it and they're like, I'm sorry about that. But if you don't mean to hurt somebody, there was no intention there, you're not trying to be hurtful, then it doesn't occur to you to apologize. And a solicited apology, you guys, like that's never that's never optimal. A solicited apology, in other words, um, you hurt me and I expect you to say you're sorry. It's not genuine. Don't go for that. Don't even ask your people. I do not believe in making children apologize because children are almost never sorry for what they did. And we're just heaping a whole lot of guilt on them. And we teach them what they did and why it hurt someone, and we ask them to acknowledge it and to understand it and do it differently next time. But to require children to apologize means that you're forcing an emotional remorse on them. And I don't think that's wise. I don't think that's healthy for children. All right, I've got another comment here, and my assistant Amber is also telling me. She posted the same thing in here about that you guys posted. Okay, so I'm going to call you 88. You said my spouse criticizes words I say, even if it's everyday things, and twists my meaning. That makes me want to stop talking. If I don't ask how he is, he gets upset as well. What do I do? I forgot to get water, you guys, and my throat's getting dry. Okay. So what I'm hearing, and I'm going to assume that you think he's on the spectrum, or he's on the spectrum, or she. You said he. It's he. When our words are twisted, basically when I hear that, when someone says that to me, that my words are being twisted, what that means is that the interpretation of your words, the meaning of your words is something different to him than what you're actually saying. Now, there can be a couple of reasons for that. One can be that there's no intent to harm there. There's no intent to make you, to twist your words on purpose, but that there's a true difference in perceived meaning. This is stage 3 of communication in the communication transformation course. We have stage 1, which is what we bring to it. And a lot of what we bring to it are those definitions of what words mean, of what phrases mean, of what certain body language means. So then when we actually interact, and neurotypical folks, we are so we also misinterpret what our partners and friends are saying and meaning. So what he's hearing from you, he's hearing it and he's assigning a meaning to it. That's stage 3. He's taking a meaning and he's reflecting that meaning back to you. And you're hearing that as twisting my words when really his meaning is different. He's hearing a different meaning. This can be completely unintentional with folks who are in a neurodiverse relationship. Somebody's on the spectrum, somebody's not, because of those differences in definitions. If you aren't aware that you have these differences, then it can really feel toxic. It can feel very undermining. And so it's so important that you learn the skill of reflective listening, which is, okay, this is what I heard you say. I heard you say this, and to teach that to your partner if he's open to that. Because then instead of focusing on what our response is, we're focusing on actually clarifying the words you said were this, and what that meant to me was this. Am I getting that right? A lot of folks with autism and neurotypical folks don't check in. We don't check in to say, hey, am I getting that right? We just automatically assume that we are getting that right. And we assume for our partner that we know what they meant. And folks on the spectrum sometimes struggle with this a little more than neurotypicals, but neurotypical folks really struggle with this too. The other thing that could be happening here is it's more of a toxic thing, is more of a control. And I hear that's not an Asperger's thing, though, or an autistic thing. That's a totally different personality disorder issue when the words that are being heard are purposefully and intentionally being changed and then basically said back to you as if, well, no, I heard what you said and this is what you meant. And there's an awareness. When there's an awareness, and you may not know this for sure, but it's something to pay attention to and investigate. When there's an awareness that what you said isn't what that meaning that's being spit back to you is, that there's more of a control issue there. So if you're experiencing that, well, some people do experience that they're being emotionally manipulated, but I want you to investigate whether your partner is willing to say, okay, we have different definitions of this. Let's try to use this new script where, I want to say, did you hear me correctly? And if your partner's completely unwilling to acknowledge that maybe they're not interpreting it correctly and they're absolutely saying, I know what you meant, that's not cool, because we can't ever tell another human being what they meant by something. We don't get that right. Nobody gets that right. Folks on the spectrum sometimes struggle with this, though, because that theory of mind, which is the difficulty in recognizing the perspective and experience of others, sometimes does block them from realizing that their definition is not the same as their partner's. So it's helpful to say, hey, you know what? I've got a different way of defining this. What I meant by that is not what you thought I meant. Are you open to hearing my perspective? And I want to help you understand me better. Nathan's saying, are you saying he's argumentative, such as a rigid thought process about it, or doesn't understand? Okay, let me get caught up on the comments here. And 88 is saying, sometimes I feel like it's both, and he gets really frustrated with me. Doesn't understand, aka says something out of left field or unrelated due to not listening or not processing, comprehending it the same way you do. Nathan's asking. And so he said, I bet you feel frustrated too as you feel unheard. And I'm guessing my wife feels the same way. Okay, so number 88, you're saying he's not processing it and comprehending it the same way I do. Okay, that is not the toxic thing. That's not the controlling, manipulative, toxic thing. That's neurodiversity. That is speaking a different language and having very different understandings of what language means. So many of you don't even realize that you're speaking this different language. I have a video here in YouTube. I can't remember the name of it, but if you're looking for it, it kind of looks like I'm actually sitting in my car at my son's baseball game. So it's like a real close up of me. And I'll tell the story about how I lived in Ireland for about 15 months back in the 30 years ago, 20 years ago. I can't do math, you guys. And so the Irish speak English just like me, but they use it differently. They use English differently. They use the same words differently. And I almost got myself into a mess of, a heap of trouble a couple of times when I misunderstood the meaning of something. So, for example, I was working as a therapist at the time, a counselor for the National Brain Injury Association there. I developed a counseling program for them. And at the time, the word partner had really got caught on in Ireland and the UK for meaning my romantic other person. And so it could be my husband, my wife, my spouse, my girlfriend, my boyfriend. That's what partner meant in Ireland. Here in the United States at that time, partner meant homosexual partner. We didn't start using the term partner for heterosexual partner until the last probably 10 years. I don't care if anybody's homosexual or heterosexual. That's not the point. But when I lived in Ireland, I had a client one time, and she referred to her partner several times, and I just made the automatic assumption that she was gay, that she was a lesbian. And so I thought, okay, all right, whatever, so I thought. And then she said something else about, she used a he pronoun or something, or said his name, and I was like, and I'm thinking to myself, so I almost really made a blunder there, assuming that she was homosexual because she was using language differently from me. Now, neither one of us was right or wrong. Nobody's right or wrong. But it was a really big difference in the meaning of that word. Really big. And that's what happens to you guys in these relationships. You're using language differently and you don't realize it. And so then when your partner, see, I use that word all the time now, comes along and says, well, you said you meant this, and you're like, no, I didn't. It's because he has a really different definition of what you said. And this can come from cultural differences. Nathan brought up the I'm sorry's in Canada. I'm down here in South Georgia. We have all sorts of expressions down here. I'm sure you can hear my southern accent sometimes. We have all sorts of little figurative language that we use, and the cliches and the figurative language can be really tough on folks on the spectrum because language, their brains, those of you who are on the spectrum, your brains are more linear and literal in the way you interpret language. And so figurative language, jokes, humor, sarcasm sometimes is really difficult. And over time, you may have learned to hear the sarcasm and you may have learned how to interpret a lot of humor, but you may not even be aware of how much just basic conversational language you're misinterpreting because of there's so much figurative uh, emphasis inserted into just basic conversational dialogue. So it's so important, you guys, that you learn how to say, hey, what I'm hearing you say is fill in the blank. Am I getting that right? This is reflective listening. If you guys want to do a deep dive into this, that's what I've got a course about this. It's the communication transformation course. And you get to, there's slides and there's a handbook, and you get to listen to the audio recordings of the 6-week coaching group that I did. And I actually have a live coaching group too. I won't be offering that again until June. But this really, truly is foundational to learning how to interact in a spectrum relationship, this communication piece. So I really encourage you to go over to the website, Spectrum. I don't know where it is here, but anyway, spectrumrelationships.com. I think aspergersrelationships.com will actually get you to the same place. All right, so Nathan's owning up to this, saying I'm just as guilty, and my wife feels like stop talking when I don't take a moment to process what she said. All right, Taylor's saying, if I'm not mistaken, they also use pants to mean underwear. Yes, you heard my video. You're talking. That's exactly. So when it rained and got wet, you had another blender. Yes, I did. You watched it. I said something about my pants getting wet. And if you're in the UK or Ireland, you know that that means underwear. And I did make that blunder. And I got some really weird looks. And does that sound familiar to those of you who are on the spectrum? Are there times when you use language and people kind of look at you like, it's because of that difference in how language is used. And that happened to me. That happened to me. Taylor saying reflective listening can get very frustrating when you repeatedly misinterpret what they're trying to convey. It's not always easy. Yes, it's a learned skill. And when I walk my private coaching clients, so when I do this 2-month intensive with folks, I virtually move in with you guys. And so I have my clients do reflective listening on a call with me. We even do it. We message regularly throughout the week, and it is not as it's not as, I keep telling you guys to do it, but I also know that it's not something that's really easy, which is why I offer to coach you guys with this, by the way. But some of you can actually do a lot on your own. You can do a whole lot on your own, learning how to reflect, learning how to clarify. But when you need extra help with that, and especially you guys, if those of you who are in long-term committed relationships or marriages, and it's just you've about gotten to the to the end, and you feel like you love each other, you care about this person, you know they care about you, but you just don't know what else to do to fix it. That's we can help you. And I say we, I've got another coach that works with me. She does more hourly coaching, but I do intensive coaching. It's you have to apply to work with me and all that, blah blah blah. But don't walk away. If your marriage is not toxic, if it's just really disconnected and you can't understand each other, give it a shot. It's the most important your marriage is the most important asset you have, especially if you have kids. Don't walk away from that until we at least try to fix it. Because I've seen so many relationships completely turn around and do a 180 from the brink of ending to actually figuring it out and becoming connected. So just know that you've got that option. Um, Number 88 says it's hard. We have kids too. So when I say something to my child, he criticizes as well. Yeah, so the word criticism, so what I'm hearing there is that he is not aligned with what you're saying, and that he is not agreeing with what you're saying or how you're saying it to your child. Um, and it isn't great for him to do this in front of your child. That's undermining, and it's very unhealthy for your child. Um, so I would encourage you to have those conversations behind closed doors, away from your children, and try to start encouraging that reflective listening. Excuse me. And if if you're really struggling with him being on board with that, contact our support staff, and we'll try to get you set up. There's even a webinar that I go over. It's like a 45-minute webinar when I go over the four stages of this. The four stages of communication, and it's a really good kind of introduction, and we can gift that to you. I don't even, I think it's $25, but I can gift it to you guys. Not a problem. Okay, so you're saying a lot of times he would start with lines with, why would you say that? So that feels like criticism for sure. And it may be. He may be really not understanding why you would say that. So this is where you can clarify. And a lot of folks feel like they have to defend themselves. Why would you say that? And so we kick into defensive mode. Well, I would say it because whatever. But it might be better to go into more explanatory mode. Like, why would you say that? Well, actually, the reason I would say, because, and to give your actual reasons to help him understand why you actually did say it. And it's so easy to go into that defensive mode, which is more fight or flight. And when we're fight or flight, we put the boxing gloves on and our partner becomes an opponent. And at that moment, he probably feels like an opponent. And so you might even say, you know what, I wouldn't really recommend that you respond right then, because when you respond in fight or flight, it's usually not pretty of us. So you might say to him, that's a good question. I'll get back to you on that. I want to explain that to you, and I'll get back to you. Let me process that so I can explain it to you. And then get back to him. Send him a text, write him an email, use bullet points. Don't get too wordy. If you write too much, it won't get read. And that's not because he doesn't care. It's because it's too overwhelming. Too many words is overwhelming. Nathan's saying, I'd be like, dude, why not the united front? Being a team is sometimes better than getting your way. You may need to be blunt and assertive with him. Yeah, okay. So, and that this, Nathan, you say this a good bit, and it's very true. Folks on the spectrum really don't need any kind of passive voice. Any passive voice that's just kind of tiptoeing around the truth, being vague, very confusing. So be very assertive, very blunt. Put it out there for him. Okay, you guys. An hour's already up. That went by fast. So I'm going to call it a day. I think I have a hungry kid. I'm glad you guys are here. A lot of you folks are from my Facebook private group. If you're here and you don't know about that, it's just it's in the description. And I'd love to have you join us over there. We have a lot more conversations and over there, not lives necessarily, but you can actually, it's a great group. There's over 1,500 of you in there now, and we talk about all sorts of things, and you can ask the group a question, ask me a question through the group, and so just come on over there and join us. And follow me on TikTok too. If you, let me see if I can pull that up. There we go. There's my TikTok, my new TikTok channel, Asperger's Relationships. So I'm uploading stuff there pretty much every day. And I'm also on Instagram. And I don't have an Instagram image for you guys. But it's also Asperger's Relationships without the underline, without the underscore. Okay. Taylor, you're welcome. And you guys are all welcome. I love having you here and love being with you here. So I'll see you guys next week. And then 2 weeks, put it on your calendar for the diagnosis and assessment. Well, not diagnosis, but the screening thing with the Autism Quotient quiz. All right. See you guys later. Bye.